The ideal Kiwi batch is miles away, secluded. That's the whole point. But if something goes wrong, you've got none of the safety of the city. You're on your own. Kia ora, I'm Philip Alpers, and tonight on Heroes, a teenager trapped in a burning batch and no way to call for help, and a landslide of rubbish threatens to suffocate a young man and his rescuers. 4 teenagers, all on their own in a batch miles from the road. It should have been a carefree, idyllic weekend. Instead, those 4 young women will remember for the rest of their days fire in the night, terror, and the unlikely couple who became their heroes. January 1994. Gwen and Brian Arnold's batch at the Poirua River mouth south of Hokitika on the west coast was so remote they had to hike for 3/4 of an hour to reach it. Brian was getting over a recent heart attack. He planned a quiet weekend. On the river, 4 young women were coming in the other way, by canoe, to another family batch at the same spot. They were looking forward to being on their own for the whole weekend.
Well, we just wanted to go down there for a holiday, all of us together. We thought there'd be no one down there, so we'd have good fun. But we turned out that Gwen and Brian were down there. It didn't matter though.
Yeah. Here we are.
Earlier on that day we were talking about how he wanted to be buried or cremated.
Yeah. God, I'm dying of heat.
Well, would you rather die hot or cold?
Cold. No way, I'd rather die hot.
Buried or cremated?
Cremated, for sure. Get it over and done with quickly.
Yuck, Tash.
Hey, let's go for a walk, eh?
Yeah, let's check out some of the batches found here.
Okay.
The Arnold's one round the corner is quite cool.
Let's go.
Vanessa and her parents knew Gwen and Brian Arnold, but none of them realised their neighbours were walking in that night.
And we were just having a look through the window, and we could see these photos on the wall, just of their family and all that.
Cool way.
That night we cooked tea and we had tea and made some damper after tea, and that it tasted really awful, but we ate it anyway, sort of part of the camping scene.
I'm out.
How do you do it? What's your secret?
We played cards and we're all tired from that day. So Angela and Kimberly went to bed and me and Vanessa sat up for a wee while.
Don't fall out.
I won't. Good night.
Actually, I'm quite tired too. Let's go to bed.
Yeah, good idea.
Just take the gas bottle. Just get rid of this.
Yeah, I'm really tired. I'll just leave these dishes till the morning, eh?
I'll just check the fire actually.
This was Vanessa's family batch. She knew the nightly safety drill. Turn off the gas bottle, scrape out the fire.
Right, let's go.
That done, Tash and Vanessa headed for their beds, confident that all was well. No one knows why, but something went wrong. In the batch next door, Gwen and Brian had arrived. He was already asleep, but Gwen was dozing with the radio on.
Hey, Vanessa, did you hear that? Yeah, probably a possum. Better check it out. Can you smell something? Hang on.
I remember Vanessa, she was yelling fire, fire, and then I just heard the smash and it was sort of just like a dream. Well, I can't remember waking up or anything, and it was just all sort of jumbled up, sort of people yelling and iron creaking and timber and all at the same time. It was awful. You know, because I couldn't breathe. I wanted to stay there, but I couldn't, so as soon as I jumped out, I just put my hand back in because I just didn't want to leave her.
The strange, the bizarre, and the intriguing.
I could feel it in my bones. I knew something was wrong.
A woman of mystery.
Nobody I talked to would give me any information.
Leaving a
Fumbling for the window, only 3 made it out. Natasha had collapsed.
I'm scared, you guys. Quick, get out of there. Vanessa, don't see a police.
By now, Tasha's best friend Angela feared she couldn't save her.
It was this noise that woke me, and I thought, oh, those girls, that's a bit of hilarity. I know what they're doing. They're out chasing those possums. But in that sort of split second, something told me, no, that wasn't hilarity.
Brian, quick, wake up. The girls are screaming. Someone's attacking them. There's something wrong.
Quick, Gwen, I've got a fire, quick!
When I first appeared out of the flax and seen the fire, it was just really a raging inferno at one end of the batch, and I think we were lucky that we could get to the other end where she actually was.
Come on! Help! You all out! You guys have got to go! I can't stay here, please!
I couldn't breathe. I was sort of gasping away, and I knew I just had to get her up and out, and I just grabbed her and hauled her up. And I wept my ribs for a month after that, so I could hardly breathe.
He thought that she was dead.
Well, I thought she was dead then when I got to the window, because she was
he was then roaring at me.
Oozing, just black mucusy muck out her nose and mouth, and I thought she was dead then.
Brian didn't realise smoke inhalation does this to your lungs. They knew this end of the hut would explode any second, but for Tash, rescue breathing couldn't wait. She was out of the fire, but the fight to save her had just begun.
We just sort of got her onto the ground, and Gwen was starting to work on her, and with that the whole room and everything just erupted into flame where we'd
just
come from,
She's coming round. Quick, let's get her home. Come, Vanessa, quick, come and give us a hand. Careful.
They were still a long way from help.
Hold her tongue, Matt.
Every one of them had breathed the toxic fumes. Their lungs were burning with pain. But 15-year-old Tash needed intensive care. Her chest and throat were clogged with soot and mucus. And then there was the other problem.
Right, I'm going to check the fire.
Gently, watch your face.
I thought I was in a dream. I was just saying over and over again, I'm dreaming, and they were all around me going, I love you, Tish. And I thought, oh no, what's wrong with me? And I looked up and I saw these photos on the wall that we'd looked at the day before, and I knew that it was real.
Okay, Vanessa, we need to fill all the buckets we can find. Quick as you can.
Armed with only a piddling water supply, they had to stop the fire before it engulfed this batch as well.
When I breathed, it felt like I was a dragon, like I could breathe fire. And my lungs were, they felt real heavy, like I had sand sitting on me or something.
With the fire finally under control, Gwen was planning the next stage. Tasha's breathing was getting worse.
You're going to have to go fairly soon, because I don't think Tasha's going to make it without oxygen.
Well, it's the fire I'm worried about. Okay, we'll go as soon as they're ready.
I knew she was touch and go, but it was pretty hard on me. I used to start huffing and puffing walking over the track, even at that stage.
Brian's heart attack went right out the door. I think it was a good test for it.
Actually, before I set out on the walk, I think I had a whiskey before I went, and just sort of soothed me down a bit, and it was quite good.
Right, girls, we're away.
Hang in there, Tash. We'll see you out there. And we love you.
Vanessa, I don't want to be cremated anymore.
They had to hurry slowly. The torch wouldn't last long, and their lungs were still hurting. Another accident in the dark wouldn't help their friend. As for Tash, she could feel herself drifting away.
For the start, I could talk back to them, but then I just couldn't be bothered saying anything, and I was just lying there thinking, what if I die and I never get to see anyone again?
Tash?
It was awful. It's just the thought of losing her, sort of thing. I sort of thought of all the good times we had together, and then, it was awful.
By first light, Brian Arnold was on his way back to the burnt batch with its owner and Tash's father.
How bad is she? Well, pretty bad. Well, I'm pleased Gwen's there with her.
I was a wee bit dicey because I didn't want to alarm him too much, but I wouldn't have been surprised if we got back there and it wasn't good.
Tash had almost stopped breathing. Very worried, Gwen forced down half a cup of sugar in some weak tea. It worked. Tash emptied the black gunk from her lungs and stomach. She was breathing again.
You're going to hate me for this, and you'll never drink tea again.
Tasha's father was fearing the worst until he saw Gwen. His daughter was going to be okay.
Guess he knew he still had a daughter. That was a pretty incredible feeling.
The doctor arrived by jet boat soon after. he brought a bottle of oxygen for Tash.
I'll leave you in here.
What have you been up to today? Hey, don't worry, we'll soon have you on the way to the hospital and they'll look after you there.
Real moving, because when Gwen and I were outside from the hospital, we both had a little tear run down our faces. We just were so overjoyed to see her so well, I think, at that stage.
They really saved my life, both of them, because Brian did when he got me out of the hut, and Gwen did just keeping me breathing and keeping me awake.
The situation was there and something had to be done, and we done the best we could. I think
And that's really what it was for us. We're just happy that
we're happy with the outcome.
There's still 4 teenage kids.
Yeah.
It's great.
Definitely, they're heroes. Yeah.
All 4 young women have woken up to the ever-present danger of fire. For Natasha, even being in the same room with a person who's smoking brings back memories of that night. But it's also brought them closer. She reckons that after what they went through, they'll always be great friends. Lots of things end their days at the local tip, but people? The young man in our next story almost had his life snuffed out by a pile of rubbish. Actors recreate a dramatic day at the local tip. It was winter, July 1970, at the Oronui tip near New Plymouth. Despite the lousy weather, 2 local teenagers were on the scrounge for a pre-owned gearbox, or pretty well anything they could find. The tip was a popular hunting ground for wrecks, and the rain made it unlikely they'd be disturbed.
Man, whose stupid idea is this anyway? Mate, I'm soaked already. Hope it's worth it. I can see the gearbox. Grass, mate. We need a spinner. I've got one in the car. Sounds good. Check the inside.
They didn't notice the danger. Days of rain had saturated the mud, the tip face, and the hill above it. As his mate walked away, Brian was left standing on a slip. The ground beneath him lay in wait for a false move, for the weight of the old car to shift, perhaps. Almost without a sound, the face of the tip had slipped away, the hill collapsed. His mate simply disappeared.
Brian! 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 No, Brian! Brian! No, Brian, come on! Where are you, Brian? Talk to me! Brian!
He wasn't getting anywhere. After a few desperate minutes of searching, it was time to run for help.
If you'd like your tyres to last longer, you could spend hours on your knees checking the pressure. Or you could buy Firestone Firehawks and get free green rings, the tyre valve that lets you check the pressure at a glance and helps tyres last longer. You have a choice. Firestone Direct, the smart choice.
Give me a little fun. I know where I want to be, with a few good friends and my family. Show me a real good time. Make it right for me, the way it's always been at KFC. Give me a little fun, serve it up to me, make it finger licking good. KFC.
Brace yourself for Telly Bingo.
We know you're in there.
We know about the big bag.
Did you say big bag? I didn't think anyone would believe me.
Well, what exactly did you see?
Easily 1 million items.
That's a very big number, David.
You don't believe me either.
$10
10 to 60% off a million items. The Big Bag Winter Sale right now at DFL.
Talk about getting dressed for less.
There's a hostage situation on Alcatraz. Fire from the producers of Top Gun and Crimson Tide and the director of Bad Boys, Sean Connery, Nicolas Cage, Ed Harris. The Rock.
Every day, people will gain a little time by getting what they need at a BP shop. At the same time they fuel up, they can pick up many of the things they might need. It may only save 5 minutes. Then again, it could be a very nice 5 minutes. BP. We keep you moving.
There's a hostage situation on Alcatraz. Fire from the producers of Top Gun and Crimson Tide and the director of Bad Boys, Sean Connery, Nicolas Cage, Ed Harris. The Rock.
And now, the follow-up to the multi-platinum No More Tears, Ozzy Osbourne, Osmosis. With See You on the Other Side. And the new single, I Just Want You.
I don't ask much, I just want.
He is Ozzy Osbourne, and this is Osmosis.
As the custody battle continues,
We can't let him testify.
he won't. The cry for revenge grows louder. Bitter blood, the shocking conclusion, next.
Under a mudslide at the Uranui tip, a young man is buried alive. His mate, unable to find him, rushes to get help. In a panic, he raced to the local service station. There he found volunteer fireman Murray Wells.
So I asked him a few questions, and he was pretty incoherent at the time. Anyway, I got out of him that he was buried under something, and so I called the local fire brigade.
By now it was dark. One of the volunteer firemen was Ross Tamati. When he got the call out, Ross was expecting to fight his very first fire.
And going to the fire station, and it's we've got to go to the dump. Fire at the dump. Let it burn.
But for Ross and his father-in-law, Jim Matuku, tonight was going to be wet and serious. Murray Wells arrived a short time later. He'd stopped on the way to pick up shovels and rope. Only his shaken young guide had any idea of the scene ahead of them.
By this time, this guy was pretty despondent. He said he's dead now. It's not worth worrying about. Didn't really know how serious it was until we arrived up there. Really, I just couldn't think of how bad it was until we actually got there and then realised what had happened. And it looked pretty impossible to me to get him out. It was just a clean, whole face. And everything had slid from the top to the bottom. And down there was a jumble of trees and old cars, and everything was piled up at the bottom. We joined all these bits of rope together. With probably the best part of a couple of 100 metres of rope. And scrambled down this vertical slip face that had slid out.
Murray led the way for Ross and his father-in-law, Jim. Problem was, the three men had almost no idea where to start.
We didn't think he'd be there. We didn't think we could find him. Didn't think we know he'd be there, but his mate, he was kept well away. He was up in the ridge. All we can hear him yelling out and saying where he was, where he saw him last.
Go to the left! Hurry up! He's gonna die!
Looking up, Jim Matuku was in no doubt of the danger. The wall of mud above them was frighteningly unstable.
Part of it was still rolling there. There was one tree there standing up on its own. That was our main concern. They thought that might fall down on top of us.
It was still standing upright, but it appeared to be moving all the time, and it was directly above us. It would have just wiped out everybody there.
Then, almost unbelievably, a sound came from inside the mud.
I can hear him! He's in here somewhere!
We heard a voice. We could hear him calling out, but we didn't know where he was. the voice was coming out from underneath this great heap of mud and trees.
The tumbling branches had buried Brian, crushed him, but also protected him from the mudslide. Somewhere under here, they knew he was still alive.
Jim! Jim, I got him!
I was more pleased than anything, because, you know, we'd found him. You know, at least we knew where he was. And that was, yeah, it was great.
Brian was firmly pinned under tons of debris, with more arriving every minute. As the local police search and rescue squad arrived, Constable Trevor Owen realised it could still take hours to get him out.
Okay, stop lights! Okay, we'll all take over down here.
On arrival, it was just a natural tip, a stinking mess, as you'd expect. It was raining, quite heavy rain, and the rain continued, and there was the threat of this other half of the slip coming down and engulfing those there, you know, at any time.
I can feel him, but I don't know how tangled up he is. We can't touch this tree, it's too unstable. We're going to have to go in underneath.
With their bare hands, they tunnelled under the face of the tip until a wire mesh Taranaki gate stopped them dead.
We need some snips down here to cut it out.
It was infuriating. Whatever they dug out was quickly replaced by sliding muck.
With all that stuff coming down, you know, you dig and you get along so far and you look back and it's all covered again. When you look back up that hill and you see all the stuff coming down, oh, it was scary, yeah.
Personally, I think it would have been good night and nurse, because there was no place to run. We wouldn't have time to take evasive action. We were working, laying on our stomachs in the mud water and stench, you know. But
you know, the more you pulled away from his leg, the more it came down, covered it up. I managed to get one free, and then a couple of hours later, well, I found out where the other leg was.
Trevor, this is Murray. Got a couple of guys up here who can relieve you. Over.
The three men had been digging for hours. They'd forged a good team. Rather than risk the extra movement and the delay of a change of shift, they wanted to stick it out, no matter what.
About this time, Nicholas Banks, who was a member of the Cliff Face Rescue Squad, arrived down with the rescue stretcher, and he was a smaller stature than Ross and I. He took over the digging of the trench.
Now there were four of them. An hour later, something in that threatening pile of trash finally seemed to shift in Brian's favour.
Yeah, freedom!
With one last heave, Jim and Trevor managed to squeeze Brian out. To everyone's surprise, he wasn't badly hurt.
But it was a great wave of relief through everybody that it was actually out and the thing was nearly over.
Ross Tamati, Trevor Owen and Jim Matuku had been digging with bare hands for 4 cold hours.
Okay.
As the police took over, Ross Tamati began to worry that he'd ruined the new jersey his wife had just knitted him. None of the three had the word hero in mind.
It was my duty, I suppose, being a fireman, to save a person.
You know, just helping somebody else, I think, you know, it's a great thing, but I don't put it down to hero. I think he might have done the same thing for me.
I just looked at it as part of the job, really. Rescuing, you know, I mean, the fact you save someone's life, well, that's the reward.
Well, I think anybody that down there was pretty heroic. Very dicey place to be.
Ross, Jim and Trevor all received police commendations for bravery. But Mrs. Tamati didn't give Ross any medals for the state of his new jersey. After 3 months of trying to wash it, she told him to take it back to the tip. I'm Philip Alpers. For more tales of genuine Kiwi bravery, join me again next week for Heroes.
We're continuing our chilling mini-series next.
as Susie seeks revenge on her sworn enemy and ex-husband, Tom. Harry Hamlin and Kelly McGillis return in Bitter Blood.